Welcome to Blueprints for Liberty, Designing the Freedom Cities of Tomorrow. This is a podcast that explores the visionary concept of freedom cities and how we can create living environments that prioritize individual liberty, social harmony, and equal opportunities for all. We look back through history to see how the past informs the future and how people can self-organize in their communities to support self-sufficiency. We also look to develop leaders that are moral and ethical in a world that is spinning out of control. Tune in to be part of the conversation shaping the future of our communities. Welcome, everyone, and we have Chris Catania with us today, and he has written a book called Community First Advantage, where we're going to talk a little bit about leadership and how it has evolved, hopefully, for the better, and how we as individuals can play a significant role, even if we are not the person in charge. So basically, how do you lead when you're not the leader? So I'll turn it over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Very excited to be here and yeah, jump into a great conversation about what we need to do to guide leadership, but also be leaders ourselves. I think that's a big part of what we'll dive into, and then look at like how do you use online communities to scale this modern leadership, right? Throughout history, and there's been a lot of rich examples of leadership models, servant leadership, and things like that. So what I've found through my research and being in community building for the last 20 years is the exciting opportunity that we can scale leadership through networks and connection and collaboration better than we could 20 years ago and even 30, 40 years ago or whatever, right? So that's the opportunity that leaders have that we have as leaders to not only do the things that we need to do as leaders, make decisions, and model the behaviors for our people that we're leading, but enable them with online networks, enable them with behaviors that are the essence of community. So for the last 20 years, I've been helping leaders develop a mindset and then develop a system, what I call like a new operating system for community, for companies and for leadership, essentially taking the essence of what makes communities such a important part of our lives and using that to guide that new modern leadership, new mindset. And then we'll get into what I call the three E's, experience, enablement, and evaluation. And in the middle of that is kind of this like nexus core of shared value. So when you look at online communities and you look at leadership and kind of what we need to help leaders do today, it really comes down to that new mindset and then equipping leaders with a system to not only launch communities, because that's kind of the easy part is like launching the communities, but the sustaining and going through all these challenges that leaders face, right? Market, market issues, pandemics, supply chain issues, internal culture change, all these different things, right? Real challenges, So I've really been excited and learned a lot over the last 20 years of how to help leaders understand the power of community, what it is, and really how to fit it into their business in a way that it's not just an afterthought, but it's really like it's a strategic lever, an engine that essentially creates this unique connection with their customers and with their employees so that it gives them like almost a competitive advantage in how they lead and how they position themselves in the market. So I'm excited to unpack all that, right? There's a lot in there, and yeah, there's this thing I call the adapt model. We can dive into that, and it's just I've really I'm so passionate about leadership, and as I've grown myself as a leader over the last 20 years and really tested a lot of these models out and these philosophies and things. So a lot of this is not just theory, it's actually action, things that have been kind of battle tested out in the field as they as they say. But I want to share it with leaders because I think right in this world that we live in today, man, it is like we need community. We need to counterbalance all of the things that are going on with connection and really help leaders navigate all this stuff. So it's, yeah, I don't think there's a better time, more poignant time to have community come up to the surface and lead us than today, right?
Exactly. It's kind of a crazy world that we live in these days. And as I think about my background a little bit as an instructional designer for so many years, working for, very large organizations and the federal government primarily because I'm in Northern Virginia. So there I was. So everybody in Northern Virginia worked for the federal government. And I was a contractor, not actually an employee, but so I worked with a lot of different departments and was tasked with writing a lot of leadership programs or taking existing
Mm.
leadership models and, putting them into an instructional model so that we could teach them. And one thing I found interesting was, leadership sits down, they create a mission statement, and they don't typically involve the whole organization. And, and logistically, there's a lot of problems with doing that. So I'm not, criticizing them, but they define what the values are. They define what, the organization wants to achieve. And then their job is to go out and motivate and inspire people to buy into this, which, sometimes works. But oftentimes, when people aren't involved in the making of this mission statement and,
Hmm.
expressing their own values, they feel like they're just being kind of drug along rather than a part of the process. And one of the things that I've focused on recently is this leading when you're not the leader.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean your power or your, abilities supersede whoever is in charge. It just means empowering yourself and maybe creating these communities, even informally, to work with leadership to make sure, let's say okay, so let's go back to the logistical problem of, say you have an organization of, 100,000 people. You can't bring them all into the room and say, how do we create a mission statement? Well, maybe some of
Hmm.
these communities are formed, and as they are formed, they can then in turn share with leadership, here's your base. This is how they feel about things. This is what's important to them. How can we take that and mesh it with the goals of leadership so that everybody is happy. And I've found that to be a rather interesting challenge because most people, when you say, how do you lead when you're not the leader? They're like, oh, I don't want that. Just
Mm.
let me show up to work and do my job and put my head down. And you're not empowering people. And so you're not getting the best out of people. So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Oh my gosh, there's so much there.
I know. Between the two
I
of us,
love
we could
it.
talk
I love it
talk a
all.
lot.
We could sit here for like a few hours just talking about that. But yeah, no, I think it's yeah, and that kind of gets to the essence of what my personal mission is to help leaders get that mindset, because like you said, if you have this mission, like the mission, vision, values, right? Like it's kind of sometimes traditionally archetypally like created in the ivory tower, and then brought down to the masses, right? I think that's it's fast becoming outdated, like to do that, right? And that's what I'm getting at with the community first leadership. And there's a model that I use called ADAPT, and I call it ADAPT for a reason because I believe that online communities can help leaders adapt to change, marketplace change, culture change, all these different things, right? The leaders that I've studied, over 100 when I was writing my book, I was interviewing them, looking at hundreds of companies, just trying to put together like what was the path, what did I experience and how do we get there, right? And one thing that I saw modern leaders do over the last 20 years and even today, they're using online communities to scale, to engage leadership both within the company and with the customers. So I think that's the part that's important too, is that it's not just internally, but it's also externally. And that's when you really hit that sweet spot. So when I talk about adapt, it stands for authenticity, decision, agility, purpose, and trust. So those are the elements that make online communities and just community in general uh, so powerful. So like authenticity means like being your true self, and that's what people resonate with. They want to follow leaders who are real, right? For the most part, right? And then what you were just talking about is the D, decision. So that means like leaning into co-creation, leaning into, hey, what does everybody else think about this? Like, well, let's bring people together before everything's baked, right? Before we put the food in the oven, so to speak. Let's talk about the ingredients. Who wants to go to the grocery store with me? That kind of thing. So the D, I think, really speaks to what you were just talking about. And I've worked with leaders who they go on this journey of being first like challenged with this, with the struggle to give up control. And what I often find and guide them through is that control is kind of a myth. I think it's not really there, in a sense. You could think it's there, but and it's kind of like holds leaders back. They believe in the myth, and once they see that it's not there, then they're looking for something else, and that something else is that opportunity for co-creation, to work with other people, to really truly collaborate and build trust, in that sense. And then they go on this journey where they're like, wow, if I open up, if I share, with people what I'm thinking about, and then mix in their thoughts, mix in, like what is actually happening on the ground level, within the organization, and people have a sense of co-ownership in the values or in the strategy, like that has this amazing like catalyst gavel, like it's like a galvanizing effect on people, right? And it's just like I've seen leaders like their eyes open up and they're like, "Wow, Chris, like this is amazing." I'm like, "Yeah, this is cool." It's pretty cool stuff, right? But it is scary at first because it's often like when I used to when I got into mountain climbing, and there's this point where you have to lean out over the
Yes, I
mountain,
know. I know.
and
Compelling.
there's before the rope catches, before the slack cuts up, it's like
Yeah.
you've just like whoop, like you're, oh
I
my
know.
gosh, what's gonna happen, right? And then bam, you get caught by the rope catches you, and you're like, oh, this isn't that bad.
Yeah.
And then you can like, wow, and the first time I mountain climbed, I was like, oh, this is amazing. But it was really scary, like getting out over the edge. I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? And then, okay, where's the slack? Where's this? I'm like, oh, and then it catches. But once it catches, like this amazing like hawk like flew right by me, and my friends were around me, and I was like, okay. But that scary part right at the beginning, like that was the part that reminded me when I work with leaders like that, they're like going from the old way of thinking, the old way of working to the new. That middle ground is scary. But once that rope catches and they're out and they can belay down and like climb, and they're connected, I think that's where I've seen just a lot of magic happen and transformation, happen. And they start to get feedback from their staff, or they get this honest feedback from customers, and they can, you know, get insights when there's authenticity, people, and there's safety, right? It's like psychological safety. People are more apt to like share what they really feel. And when you're sharing, people are sharing, and when people are sharing what they really feel, like that's like you can actually solve problems. And
Exactly.
and then so yeah, it's just an amazing journey. And I've seen leaders go on it. Like it's not a microwave experience, right? It's just more like when you go to a nice restaurant, and you're in for like a 4 or 5 course meal, right? Like that's what we're talking about. Like community building is not a microwave. Like you can't microwave it. It's not like pop it in the microwave, 30 seconds, bam, it's done, right? Like the transformation happens over time. You can't rush trust, and you can't rush community. But man, is it worth the wait? Absolutely. Like it's when it really comes out, right? When that great meal hits the table, that that chef took time to like learn that recipe, and that food took time to build and all the stuff that went in that meal, like that's better than the like I don't know again, I do love TV dinners at a certain point in my life, but which would you rather have, right?
Yeah.
The nice meal or the meal coming out of your microwave that took like 30 seconds to make, right? So, but that's the thing, right? But leaders have to be open to that and like work through that fear and those myths. And what you said was awesome because that's like, yeah, they want, the natural human thing and unfortunately, what gets reinforced in our culture and in organizational culture is control. Hold tight to it. Like, don't let people in. But if leaders just get out on the edge of that mountain and lean back and let the rope catch, like, I think that's when you see that hawk fly by and you're like, oh, this is amazing, and at
But you
least
don't.
that's my example,
Yeah,
my experience.
it's interesting because I am not a mountain climber, but many years ago I did have my husband's brother was, an avid mountain climber and he's like, "Oh, let's go rappelling." And I'm like, "Okay, that sounds interesting."
Yeah.
We're not on a super high it's a cliff, but and if I would have fallen, without a rope, I definitely would have hurt myself.
Hmm.
But I remember even to this day, and that had to have been like 20 years ago, the feeling of just, and I'm like, I just can't do this. I just can't do it. I can't do it. I was like, oh no, because I'm very much a person that wants to be, in control, not of other people, because I
Hmm.
don't feel like I care much what other people do, but I want to be in control of myself and I want to know that that rope is there. And I just remember that feeling, but then I finally, just let go and did it. And it is amazing, kind of on a weird note. One of the many dreams, people have a lot of recurring dreams in their life. One of my most recurring dreams is me being a bird flying.
Hmm.
And
Wow.
yeah, that feeling was very similar to that. And I was like, wow, I'm up here with all of these things. And it just,
Hmm.
you can't explain it. So I wonder, we think about team building exercises because many leadership programs incorporate a lot of team building exercises. Maybe they should all do this rappelling activity just so they
Yeah,
get the sense of,
let's do it. Whatever it
yeah,
takes.
how
Yeah.
freeing it is to let go of control and how you have to trust. And the other thing that I was thinking as you were talking is one of the things I found most challenging was creating community. When I was working for these large organizations that had worldwide employees, we were all about let's build community, and you had to do it remotely. You had to do it through online
Mm,
sources. And I hate to say this, but it was like nobody wanted to engage, nobody wanted to participate. I think partly because they didn't feel like there was a person on the other end
hmm
and they didn't know that person on the other end. And if you don't know somebody, that ice breaking kind of activity to say, hey, who are you? And, how do I get to know you better? And how do I know that you and I are going to have some kind of synergy that's going to allow us to accomplish whatever task we've been given? And
mm,
what I found, kind of going back to what I just said, was yeah, we almost had to force people into these online communities and say, here's a
mm,
task, here's all of, each of you play this role, and I want all of you to complete this task together. And it forced people into these communities. And then they were like, oh, yeah, see, I got to know so and so. And, based on that, I don't know what your experience with building it is, but I found it very challenging to build online community.
absolutely. Oh, 100%. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. Like building online communities is hard. But like anything that's difficult has a lot of reward and has a lot of value on the back end, right? Um, and that's why, I often tell people like if you're looking at an online community or you're part of one and it seems like everything's really organic and flowing and everything's working. It's probably run really well and it's engineered. Like there's a lot of thought behind that. And that thought is that hard work. And And yeah, like it's this weird thing about us as humans. Like we want to connect, and some of us are introvert and some of us are extrovert and some of us are ambivert, like in the middle. And but I believe we all have a desire to connect. And when you look at the science of it, right? You look at the neuroscience. There's some really interesting research that's been done over the last few years that really proves some of these things that leaders, they often think of community as like a soft thing, like, oh, it's nice to have, or it's like a warm fuzzy thing. And hey, we're trying to do business here. Like they're at odds with each other. And actually, no, they're not. So, but you look at the science, like the neuroscience, and when we connect, like what you and I are doing right here, we can see each other, we're talking. Like there is a chemical reaction going on, like oxytocin, dopamine, like it's going up, like literally as we're talking, right? So I did a bunch of research on myself. Like there's this app called the Six app by Dr. Paul Zak did some really cool research. They call him I think the love doctor, just because he gets really into neuroscience and how oxytocin makes us feel more connected and builds trust. And it's really interesting. But I bring that into my work, and I use that to answer your question because that's the reward. And when you're building communities, you kind of have to work against what people think, that they don't want, or and you really have to get strategic on like laying out like what's in it for me, like what's in it for the other person. I call it value propositions. And there's this model I use called the three E's, and essentially the three E's it's the shared value. So I think people aren't going to join a community if it's not clear like what they're going to get out of it. And it may sound selfish, but it's reality. It's true, right? Like there's that's just how we're wired, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's a layering of things that we're always analyzing, like what am I getting out, what am I getting, going to get out of this? So I think when you're trying to build communities, it is hard. There's no way getting around that, but the payoff is huge. And over the years, I've developed different strategies to work around that, to engage people, because there are certain people who are more designed to build community, so you can leverage those people. You leverage the extroverts, and the introverts play a role. 'Cause there's this thing called the community life cycle, and there's this model called the 1-9-90, which basically is like 1% of the people are going to be creating the content that is in the community. 10% of the people are going to be like commenting and building on that, and then the rest of well, us, I shouldn't say us, but everybody flows in between this eventually. But the 90%, like that, they're learning, or we used to say lurking. I don't like to say lurking because it's kind of like weird and creepy, but they used to say that back when the research was done. But everybody's learning, right? So like, but you need a community. You need all those elements, all those people, all those personas to do that. So when you're building a community strategy, you have to build it in a sense of like there's different people, and there's different personalities, there's different mindsets, in that. But you have to make it clear of what people are going to be getting out of it. Are they going to get their questions answered? Are they going to have a chance to be heard? Like product enhancements, or sharing something about company culture that they want feedback on. Like there has to be really clear value propositions, because it's not like the Field of Dreams, the movie Field of Dreams.
Hmm.
They
Yeah.
build it. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
Like that's not how it works. Like you can build it, but you have to make it clear, like what's the purpose of this community? Like like why do we have it? And then deliver on that, and that's the part where the leaders get to do that, right? That's an amazing opportunity to say, hey, we're going to invest, we're going to dedicate and be intentional about what we are doing here together, right? Because I consider, like, I think we all should consider like companies are communities. whether you say it like that or not, like it's a group of people together trying to do one thing, essentially be profitable or make an impact in the world or help people solve a problem with a product or with a service or with, a mission, right? Nonprofit or profit, whatever it is, right? So companies are communities. And in order to get over that, like, how do you actually get people talking? Like, how do you actually do do the things that you want to do in the community? You have to model what you say you're going to do. Because that's one thing too, like leaders get, they get excited, but then they're like, oh, somebody else can do that. And that's true to a certain extent. Like some leaders, in order to get things going, when I say leaders, I'm talking, in my mind, I'm thinking, the C-suite or executives, things like that. But I consider all of us leaders, to be honest. Like we all lead. People are always following us, whether we realize it or not. But leaders have an opportunity to bring people together and then deliver on that. But they're always modeling it, because we're always, as like human creatures, we're always looking to see like how we should act based off of other people, right? So to get people to contribute to a community, you have to show them why, and then you have to actually go in there and do it and ask a question, be vulnerable, be the first one to get out on the dance floor and be the first one to do that. But really good community building is engineered. You understand, okay, who are the people who are most likely to get on the dance floor? We'll invite them out and, do that, bring people there and get the people who, are good talkers and you have to bring it together. It's like a chef. Like a chef is in the kitchen trying to make something and like he or she's bringing all these ingredients in to to the mix, right? And at that level, at that community building level, that's what gets people out from their, you know, um, from out on the wall to the dance floor, so to speak, to talk to each other. And then you have to reinforce it. You have to celebrate it, right? You have to say, "Oh yeah, this is really great." And you have to encourage people and highlight, recognize when someone does something that's vulnerable and like is like, oh wow, that's amazing. Like you should highlight them because that's hard to do. It's not easy to be vulnerable. And but communities don't happen without vulnerability. So leaders, all they have to do a lot of times is just make space for recognition. When somebody is vulnerable in their community and they take that action and they ask something as simple as asking a question, right? It's like admitting that you don't know something and you need somebody else to help you to
Yeah.
do something. Probably one of the hardest things we do as human beings is like admit that we don't know something.
And
So,
ask for help.
so when that happens, like leaders should recognize that and elevate that person who took that chance. And then person who comes in and answers the question, they should be recognized too. And then doing that over and over again, like that's how it builds because then people go, "Oh, okay, this is actually if I commit to contributing to this community, like it's actually going to do something. People actually listening. Like my contributions mean something, and without that, it's like the community tends to die out and then that's when it doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think, going back to kind of the beginning of what you said, talking about introverts and extroverts, I'm definitely
Mm,
an introvert. And having been a contractor and coming into many new environments and new people all the time, I'm one of those that tends to sit back and it's like, okay, let me sit back and listen and, get the lay of the land, figure everything out. And I'll pick up in a hurry whether it's safe for me to say something in this
hmm
organization or community, whatever, whether it's an online community or even in person, because I see how the leader reacts to other people who are contributing. And the dynamics of the group are really interesting. And I think this is where a leader, that really is at the top of the hierarchy, I guess you'd say, can make this work or fail is like you said, you come in and you find that people gravitate toward people like them. And but there are other people in the group who can contribute, but maybe they're not like these other people and they
Hmm.
don't, their personalities or whatever just don't quite mesh. But yet you need to make that person feel included and you need to make them feel like their contributions are valued. And I think the other part of it that I find interesting and challenging is when people make mistakes, because you see
Mm.
this all the time. How does the leader respond? If
Yeah.
I feel like the leader is going to be critical, or, I've seen leaders call out people in meetings and, condemn them. And
Mm.
you can just see the body language of everybody in the room. Even if you're online, it's like, whoa, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
volunteer to do anything that
Not
I don't know
safe.
how to do, and I don't know how to do it well because I don't want to be that person that gets called out. So there's so many dynamics that go into this.
Mm.
And I think I know this is a little bit extreme, but being hyper aware
Hmm.
of all of the dynamics that are going on in the room and is very important. And one of the things that I talk about a lot in my harmonic leadership program is when you walk into the room, and like I said, I've taken every personality test out there. I'm like 100% introvert, okay?
Yeah.
So, when
Mm.
I walk into a room, I'm going to sit down and just, like I said, get the lay of the land. But I also have been in many situations where I've been working with an organization long enough that I walk into the room and I see all the different personalities, and I'm like, okay, this is going to be a rather interesting meeting.
Mm.
But,
Hmm.
and so what can I do? If I'm going to be a leader without being in charge, then how can I play a role in changing the dynamic of that room? And really, what it comes down to is simply the energy that I project. If I walk in there and I'm kind of closed, closed body, and I'm just sitting there you know, but if I'm more open, your body language says so much, like, and then just
Mm.
say hi to the person next to me and
Yeah.
say, ask them
Very
about their
simple.
day. Yeah. How are things going? Oh, I know that, you had a different, your mother was sick and you had to take off last week. How's your mother doing? Just something that opens that up. And what's most important to me is doing that with somebody that you don't necessarily get along with.
Mm.
Because
Hmm.
when you
Hmm.
do that, and I'm a firm believer in energy, out and about us, that just changes the whole dynamic of the room. And that's a way you can be a leader without being in charge. And you can be put into these situations that can be uncomfortable and difficult. And as much as I'm an introvert, there's times where I'm like, okay, I'll raise my hand and I'll volunteer because I know nobody else wants to do it because it's going to be that uncomfortable situation. And I'm willing to take the heat if things don't go
Mm.
right, which is a really difficult thing to do. But these are just simple things that we as individuals can do. We don't have to be in charge to do those simple things. And when, the heat comes down on you because maybe you didn't do it right, my reflexive response is, okay, hey, I volunteered for this, hey, and
Mm.
I get real defensive, like, I told you I didn't know how to do this, but I was willing to go out on a limb for you. And instead, just be gracious and thank you for that feedback, and I'm going to try to do better next time. There's just so many little things like that that we can do as individuals that can change the dynamic of a community.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the essence right there.
Mhm.
It's not the whole, it's the individual. And communities happen from inside out, from inside the person, and like you said, the person sitting next to you, and that person sitting next to that person sitting that, it's kind of,
Mhm.
it has that concentric impact. Throw a
Mhm.
rock into a pool, right? It's like
Yeah.
watch the rings, right? I think that's the idea, right on. Yeah, it's yeah, and hopefully people feel, that they do have a an opportunity to uh, you know, the, an opportunity to impact others, even though they're not, in a leadership position necessarily in the traditional sense that we're talking about, the senior leadership or C-suite, all that kind of stuff. I just think that people underestimate how impactful they can actually be as leaders themselves. That's why I like even myself, like when I was, in college or, working my way through my career, like I didn't always see myself as a leader, but once I did, I had moments when I was, in boardrooms and, or trying to get into the boardroom to talk, to do that. Like there's a mindset shift that happens inside of you, right? That you're like, oh, I am a leader. Like, yeah, and then you start to experience, and when I got into the concepts of like managing up, like what does that mean? To somebody who's younger can influence somebody who's older, in a leadership position because, of trends or technology or just whatever, right? And that there's all these ways that we can influence others, even though we may not be in like that like leadership traditional, the food chain kind of thing, the those different levels, right? I think and in modeling the behaviors. Like, I mean, it's just like it's as simple as that. Like, and that's what I tell leaders too when when I'm speaking to them or workshops or coaching or whatever. It's just like what you do, like your actions, and that's when I was like, okay, are you being authentic? As much as you can, because there's a lot of there's a lot at stake. Again, I'm not gonna lie, like there's a lot to lose by
Yes.
being authentic. I think and that's a real fear that leaders have when they're among their peers, to do that. So I get that. And I felt that. Like, I'm like, okay, am I going to really like help somebody like what I'm really feeling, like, with my family or, like what I'm going through, like, and you do have to be, you know, selective on certain things. So there is context, like, is this person safe? Can I trust this person? Like all these different things. So, I think, but modeling it as much as we can with our own behavior, with how we treat people, how we talk to people, what we post in online communities, what we and what we don't post
Yes.
also.
That says a lot.
Like so, like all these things, like we have so much more power than we realize to influence others, and I think we do not understand, even at an individual level, how much we actually influence others. I'm every day I'm like, oh wow, okay, even I have two kids, and it's like I'm still like amazed at how much it's not what I tell them, it's what I
Yes.
show them
Yes.
is what changes their behavior.
And
Right?
what you
So
model for them.
yeah,
Yes.
modeling, showing. Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. It's like, you know, is my kid gonna do what I want them to do? Well, not if you're not doing what you're telling them to do. Like, if you're contradicting, they're gonna like, what the heck is that? So it's just there's all these great examples essentially that
Mhm.
we have that show us that we have a lot of power to do that. And yourself as an introvert, like it's a tremendous act of courage to lean over to the next person and say, "How's your day going?"
I know.
It's like it probably scares the
An
heck out of you,
extrovert
right?
is like, why is
Right?
that such a
Like, oh
challenge?
yeah,
What's
yeah,
the big
yeah,
deal?
and yeah, and it's like, I mean, I'm in between. Like, I'm an introvert who likes to be extroverted for a certain amount of time, and
Yes.
then my battery goes down.
Yeah.
But I also thrive on connection. Like I thrive on doing things like this. Like we're
Yes.
connecting, right? We're
Yeah.
sharing ideas, and so. But for me, like there's like a little battery that goes down. I'm like, okay, but then I get recharged by talking to people. So it's this weird thing, but it nonetheless, it's for people who may not come natural to them in anyone, I think it's an act of courage,
Mhm.
because there's a fear, right? Is this person going to want to talk to me? Are they going to reject me? And I think we deal with rejection underneath our emotional hood more than we realize. Like, it's like, and that I think is at the essence of the individual's role in the larger community is like all these other emotions that we deal with,
Mhm.
and that just gets into like how do leaders navigate that? They you know they love control because if they give up control, they're afraid of something. Well, what are you afraid of? I mean, you just kind of go like you follow that trail a little bit. Like, well, are you afraid of like
The
you
dominoes
know
fall.
like looking stupid or, people saying that you don't know what you're doing,
Or trusting
like
somebody to do something that you aren't sure they're going to do it and do a good
yeah,
job, and then it reflects on you
that's
as
on you.
individual.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot at stake,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's again, I never try to, um, like downplay what is at stake for leaders. And because I've been there, like I've had to like, should I trust this person? Like I got a vision in my head. I know exactly what I need to do,
Hmm.
but I need to trust somebody else to bring it
Hmm.
to life and to execute on it.
Certain part.
And I
Yeah.
have to pick somebody, or I have to figure that out and I have to do that, right? So it's like you work through this, and that's why I came up with the adapt model was like,
Yeah.
well, I do all these things when I'm building communities or as an individual in a community. Like I have to model all these different things. And that's when I started to like, okay, well, this is how I'd love to help leaders develop that because that's what I experienced myself, like as,
Hmm.
figuring out like where are the gaps in modern leadership and trust and like how does it fit with all the challenge or not fit, but how does it address all of the challenges that leaders have today? That some of them are new, some of them are not new,
Hmm.
but there's so much noise. The noise to signal ratio has increased, but I think the nature of the noise hasn't necessarily changed a lot. There's just more noise of different things, but anyways, it's just a way of like how do leaders navigate that? Well, I think a community-driven mindset is a fantastic tool to have in any leader's toolbox because we're in the middle of like this loneliness epidemic that's been going on for years. Since 2019, they started documenting, the Department of Health, right, was like actually did studies to show, and there's been a lot of books written about it too, about
Hmm.
people don't go to bowling alleys anymore. Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone,
Hmm.
showed that in like 1998, 1996 or so, like that started the downturn. So we've been dealing with this for a long time.
Hmm.
So it's like we have online communities now to help us, but leaders at scale haven't really accepted that. There's been some great examples of other companies, I think popular ones like Lego, Microsoft, and some of the other companies that like use online communities to engage their customers and also build it internally. But most leaders today haven't really embraced that. And and I think it's just a fantastic tool to like mindset to be able to do that because you got authenticity, you got decision, agility, purpose, like all these things like the people that leaders are leading, like they're looking for these things. Like they want an authentic leader. They want somebody that they can trust, right?
Yeah, it's funny you brought up Lego because I'm a Lego Serious Play certified, instructor.
Oh,
And
you are? Oh, awesome.
yeah, sounds like you know what I'm talking about. Most people don't.
Hmm.
But as we, go through the exercises that we do in this environment, it really does bring out the introverts. I mean, it shows the group dynamic, and you're working on a Lego model, and it's funny because the very first activity we do is you're given, I think, like 10 blocks, and they're all yellow and like two red ones or something. Everybody's given the exact same blocks,
Hmm.
and everybody has to create something with it. And then at the end, when everybody creates their little creation, everybody's like, okay, here's what it is. And you're told to create a duck.
Hmm.
You would be amazed at the thousands of types of ducks there are out there. You can
Yeah.
create with 10 little, blocks, two red ones and like eight yellow ones. And but then you ask them, what was your thinking? What was your thinking process behind this? Why did you? And then you move to bigger models, and then you move to whole, tables full of all these different moving parts and environments and everything. But everybody has to participate. And as an introvert, that was really hard for me at first to
Mm.
be in this around this table and explain why did I create my little part of the, ecosystem over here in this way, and how does it interact with them? And then this person over here goes, yeah, but if you interact with me this way, then that affects my model over here. And this whole thing, and all of a sudden you've got people talking, even, and the extroverts are like, in some ways, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but kind of trying to dominate, like, hey,
Mm.
you know, and as an introvert, my first inclination was, okay, I'll just sit back and let the extroverts do all the work. And then when they tell me what to do, I'll just go do it. And that you can't. You're not allowed to do that in this environment.
Wow.
Everybody has
Wow.
to contribute. And it's fascinating. By the end of an 8-hour day, you have just got to know people on a totally different level.
Mm.
Many of the people who are in control had to let go of control, and they had to look at something from somebody else's perspective. Why did you create this in your little ecosystem over here? Okay, well, that makes sense. Well, maybe I can modify my environment. I thought my
Mm.
environment was perfect. I thought I did everything right over here, but I'm seeing how it's impacting you.
That's
And you're
awesome.
doing it in a third person kind of way
Mm.
so that, nobody gets defensive, nobody gets angry because it's just a Lego model, right?
Mm.
And so it's just fascinating. And I've been working on ways to make this online, and we're finally coming up with ways now to build these Lego serious play communities online.
Wow.
Um, but it's fun. It's loads of fun, even for, introverts like me. So I think there's just so many different ways to go about accomplishing all of this. And I I think my key takeaway from this conversation is that everybody plays a role, and it's important that we all embrace our own role. And when we embrace our
Hmm.
own role and realize whether we like it or not, whether we sit back and just say, hey, let the world go on around me, tell me what to do, we're still having an impact. And it can be a negative impact because I'm not contributing. Maybe they're not getting my great ideas that I have. Or on the flip side, maybe there's times where I just need to do what I'm told. So there's just so many dynamics, but thinking more, and I don't mean critically isn't the word I'm looking, more reflective of my own role and my own, how do I interact rather than, you know, trying to go to all these leadership programs that tell you how to motivate and inspire people to do whatever you want. And I love servant leadership. I think it's great. It's one of my favorite leadership models, but still it comes back to the individual, whether you're, the CEO of a company or you're a frontline worker. And I think we live in a world where people are really pushing back saying, well, my role as the frontline worker is every bit as important as the CEO. Why does he get paid more than me? Why does, all that kind of thing, right?
Mm.
And, I understand the thinking behind all of that, but the frontline worker is every bit as important as the CEO because the company wouldn't work if you didn't have frontline workers. So, but rather than be envious or jealous because they're making more money, if you aspire to want to be a CEO, you can aspire to be a CEO. But I think once you embrace your own role in things and you take ownership of that, I think it definitely changes, yourself.
Yeah.
If you're happier with yourself, then you're going to project that at work and it's going to catch on with other people. And that's being a leader.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. If yeah, awesome. And if I could go back to your Lego example real quick, because
Sure.
I love what you said, and I wanted to highlight like the through line to our conversation. Like you said something just amazing about your experience with Lego, and the part of the story that's really inspired me as I researched the actual kind of inside story, right, of like what happened there,
Mhm.
because they were in a moment, in the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, in some pretty financial pit. Like I think it was like $800 million of like debt, and so like, well, what do we do, right? It's like the history of the company, toy. Like, what do we do? Like great legacy, so what I found is in talking with people who worked there and who built the first beginnings of the Lego community is that there was what you experienced, what you just described is the results and the output, the meal on the table, so to speak, of years of transformation. Because
Yeah.
what happened in that first, there was a leader, Brad Justice, who was courageous, and one of my colleagues, Jake, he was interacting with the adult fans of Lego group online, and Lego wasn't at first open to engaging with them, and they didn't realize that their people were actually their new market, so to speak, was adult people playing with Lego, right? They're like toys, toy stores, like that's who gives us ideas, like that kind of thing, right? So Jake started interacting with them and was relaying that information back to the Lego leadership, and this person, Brad Justice was open enough to be able to listen to what was happening. And he goes in and posts a comment in the usernet forum there. And that starts the journey.
Hmm.
But it doesn't end there, right? Like what's fascinating to me, because I've worked with companies who they launch something, leadership changes, and then everything
Yes.
falls and goes, and
Yes.
the flower dies, right?
Hmm.
And the ground gets all dry, right? And everything dies, right? Because new leadership. But what happened was there was this relay race, like a passing of the baton through three series of leaders at Lego that really led to that transformation, and they shared that vision with each other. It was almost like, well, you need to carry this on. Okay, I'm going to carry it on. I'm going to build on it. I'm going to carry it on. I'm going to build on it. So through three leaders, to what you just described today, like that's the example of a community driven mindset at the leadership level. Didn't start right away, right? It took some
Right.
time for them to like,
Exactly.
it took a crisis, to be honest. Like it took a crisis, and it usually does.
Yeah.
Most of
Unfortunately.
the times when I work with leaders, like there's something wrong,
Yeah.
like something's not working, like
Yeah.
help us, kind of thing. There's a crisis, it teaches us, right? It's like, so, but they were open to it
Mhm.
and they adapted and they use communities to adapt to that, to the extent where here we are 25 years later or whatever, you're telling a story about Lego, and there's millions of stories like that. There's
Yeah.
TV shows, there's movies
Yeah.
that have been made about the power of Lego,
Yeah.
and all of that movies and ideas came from the online communities. It was the genesis of a leader being courageous enough to go, oh yeah, put the post in the community, engage with the people, and like have that adaptive mindset and be agile, be enough emotionally aware of that and build the trust with the people. And they had to build trust internally too in the organization, right? Because we've all been there. Like you have to
Mhm.
like explain to people internally, like, what are we doing? Like, are you sure? Like, this has always worked. Like, we just have to double down
Yeah.
on everything and not change.
Yeah.
Double down on what we're, no. Like, so give credit to those people who were the internal change agents
Mhm.
who believed in the community. And yeah, it's just an amazing story, but it in the context of community-led leadership and community-led mindset, like it doesn't always get told in that sense, but that's like I loved what you said in that story. That's why I wanted to tell that a little bit because it brings our conversation
Yes.
like full, right? Because those people, Jake, the online people in the online community, like they weren't leading the company,
Mm-mm.
but there's champions, right? Like
Yes.
what you're describing is this chance for people to be an internal change agent, be an internal champion for community and the power that it brings. And no better way than to model that. And that's like that's kind of what we're getting at in this conversation is like what can you do as an individual if you are not the typical leader at the leadership level kind of stuff, right? Like what can you do as a person? But but I also believe too, and I don't know if you're aligned with me on this, but like I think we bring that mindset with us as we evolve. If like you
Oh yeah.
said, if you aspire to be a leader in the sense of like you want to be a CEO someday, or you want to be a VP or whatever, or have, a bigger impact and be, you know, have more responsibility, like you bring your individual who you are and your mindset with you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's the idea. Like whether you're a frontline worker or, or if you are a frontline worker, you have that ability. You're interacting with customers face to face. You could be a leader someday, in a boardroom that now you're just a different person. You're just in a different role, but you're the same person. So that's the power of it. You bring it with you. It starts with you and it doesn't leave you. Well, hopefully it doesn't.
Hopefully,
Like
yeah.
that's the thing. But yeah, no, awesome. Thank you for allowing me to go in there because you told a great story about Lego. I was like, oh, we need to the full circle.
Circle.
It was
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today. I definitely feel like given we've talked about theory, but we've given people practical application of how do I do this? And I think it is important to understand, like you said, if you're a frontline worker and you're embracing these ideas and taking that leadership role, and you choose to take that with you as you evolve and move up in your company or organization, you will realize the benefits because you experience them firsthand. And so taking that with you as you climb the ladder of success um, will benefit everyone around you. And it just makes, things so much better rather than just sitting in your frontline, job going, well, maybe one day if I take enough leadership classes and I, go get my MBA and whatever, I'll be able to do this. And instead,
Mm.
just embrace who you are and lead lead from where you stand.
Yeah, be the change that you want to have happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
As somebody famous once said, right?
exactly. I wonder who that
Gandhi, right? I
was.
think it was Gandhi. Be the
Yeah,
change that you want, right?
yeah,
It's like simple as that. I mean,
I
it
know.
really is. Yeah, it's just modeling that, right? I mean, again, you could, I use examples in my own life, my own neighborhood where I live, right? It's like,
Yeah.
are people connected there?
Hmm.
Have you talked to your neighbors? Like it really is that simple. And then
It's
you
simple in
make it.
theory and
Yeah.
hard in practice, like everything else.
Yes, yes. And we need each other, right? I
Mhm.
think like even this conversation, right? Like you're encouraging me. There's
Yeah,
things that you've mentioned here that I'm like, okay, cool, and I'm here talking about all this stuff, all this kind of stuff. I need to live it out.
yeah,
And some days I do, some days I don't, but most days I do.
yeah. I
Right?
try.
In that sense, I mean, if we could be real, authentic, right? It's like that's the kind of the thing that we need to ask ourselves, and be gentle on ourselves too,
Mhm.
when it doesn't work out. Like I think that's part of being in an authentic community is like when you mess up, like just own it, and man, have I seen like relationships get stronger when when that happens. But again, like you said, it's simple but not easy to do that. But
Mhm.
I think that's the takeaway today is like we need that. We have so many things that are challenging us to be connected. We got, so much polarization going on. We have technology, we have AI in the mix there, like
Mm.
doing this weird thing with
I
our
know.
with our connection and our brains. Like we
I
just
know.
we just have to look out for each other
Yeah.
and we have to check in, with each other because like yeah, I don't think anybody's immune to it. Like the way things are being designed and the way technology is like an amazing thing, but then it can be it can be a divider used in the wrong way, and that's the part like, and that's probably it's probably a whole nother podcast
I know.
of like how the dark side of community, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't want to end our conversation like that, but I'm just saying like it's important for us to do these things because there's an immense responsibility that we have today. It's like, we're gonna end this conversation. The world's gonna be out there. Like, we're gonna have to connect with some people. Like, put down the phone or text somebody or go model something
Mhm.
and like actually model some of the stuff we're talking about. Like, just go out and do it. Because it's like that's what we have to do, and the
Yep.
world needs it. Like, the world needs you, Cheryl, to continue to do what you're doing.
Mhm.
And it's just it is that serious, inspiring, but there's an immense opportunity to do that. Yeah, lean over to the next person, ask them how to do it in
Exactly.
the next meeting that you're at, right? So it's yeah, it's been great. Yeah, great chat. And you mentioned like practical things, and that's what I love to be able to give people. Like, I don't like to stay at the theoretical level. I try not to for too long, but like models and frameworks I think are helpful. And then the book is coming out. It's like it's really designed to help people. Like, it's a manual, it's a playbook, so it's like a tool, and people can go to the communityfirstadvantagebook.com, and you'll get resources there. So like I've mentioned a whole bunch of frameworks and like tools you can actually do, exercises, more books, resources, other things to help people, right? Because some of this stuff may be hard to get going on, but I really always want to equip people with the right tools. So yeah, there's all those tools, and there's some free assessments too that people can get there. So there's things that are becoming, and I have more stuff coming out, more writings and all that kind of stuff that kind of like even our conversation here I think has spurred some new
Thoughts? Yes,
some new
definitely.
ideas. So, but I do hope this has been helpful, and it's just amazing, and to be able to sit, have time with you today.
Oh, well, thank you for taking your time to talk to us. And um, we'll go ahead and give them, you gave me the website, but if there's any other contact information, and of course, all this will be included in the show notes so that it's easily accessed and readily available for people to use.
It's the community first book, or community first advantage book.com. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. I'm always sharing stuff on there, tips and links and resources, things like that. And yeah, if you just go to that website, you'll be able to get all the goodies and follow
Great.
along. And yeah, thank you so much. This has been fantastic chat. I've
All
really
right.
enjoyed it.
Thank you. You too. If you've been enjoying the podcast, please take a moment to leave a 5-star rating to help others discover this valuable content. Your support is greatly appreciated and helps us continue creating engaging episodes for our listeners.